What's up? What's happening? Welcome here to Lacrosse Now. Travis Eldridge and Tom Eschen back with you this week. A lot to get to on this show. We're going to break down the IL media poll on the men's side. The top 20 is out here for the preseason. We'll tell you what surprises us and maybe the team outside the top 10 that is the most dangerous.
Yes, and we'll talk about the Big Ten today. Both the men and the women will make some predictions along with the American Women's Conference as well. We got a couple great guests today. Graham Bundy from Georgetown, Aurora Cordingley from Maryland. So you're going to want to stay tuned for both those conversations. Love their insight and really got a feel of who they are as people, too, which I love about that.
Graham Bundy, big golfer.
Yeah.
So if you're into golf, you want to make sure you stay tuned for that.
Breaks down the Kansas City Chiefs like none other.
Yeah,
so,
I mean
yeah.
What else do you need? So stick around for that. But we're going to start with the Inside Lacrosse media poll on the men's side. The top 20 for the preseason is out. Defending champion Virginia, #1. They got all but one first-place vote. Not a lot of surprise there, considering they bring back a lot from a team that's now won 2 national championships in a row. But we're not going to talk about this normally because the top 5 feels right. But what is your biggest surprise when you look at the media poll top 20 that's been brought out this week?
I mean, I think seeing Syracuse at 12 for me, I feels like, honestly, obviously they had a rough finish to their season for a lot of different reasons.
Yep.
But at the same time, they have the talent, everybody. I think we know that. And then you have talent coming in your coaching staff. You have Gary Gate and Dave Petramala. And don't forget, just on their, their staff on the website, as this volunteer assistant coach or whatever it might be, T.D. Erlin is their face-off coach. So you've got maybe one of the best of all time to do it offensively, one of the best defensively, T.D. Erlin, Pat March, who's one of the best minds offensively in lacrosse. I just don't understand how Syracuse can't get better in all of that, right? You can't get worse in this situation. I don't think you can get any worse with that kind of coaching around you.
And we continue to say it when we've been talking about these teams. And like with Syracuse, they're number 12. And obviously, I think the end of last year has a lot to do with that. But I have a media poll vote. To be up front, they are in my top 10. Mainly because I look at their roster. And when you look at Syracuse's roster, I don't know, talent-wise, I don't understand how it's not a top 10 team.
And it's proven. It's what we've seen from these guys individually, maybe not as well together cohesively before, but all these guys have the talent. And
right,
I think that's
100%.
proven.
And I think they bring back a good amount from a team a year ago. They did lose some of the midfield, but it was a midfield that was considered one of the best and deepest in the entire country entering the tournament. And remember, it's a team that beat Virginia, the national champions, twice last year.
Absolutely.
So, like, I know backs against the wall, matchups, whatever, but any team that can do that has to be in your top 10, right? Like, you get blown off the field against Georgetown, but you mentioned all the things going on. Like, that end of the season was rocky. So I don't know, but Georgetown is top 5 after their season got demolished in the NCAA tournament against Virginia. So it's hard for me to feel like you're applying the same thing to both. For me, Syracuse is a top 10 program. They're not top 5 yet.
No.
I think they've got things to prove to be top 5, but I have a hard time thinking they're not going to be inside the top 10 because that puts you in an at-large berth in the NCAA tournament, and I just can't see this program not being there.
So 2 things. Bobby Gavin comes in from Virginia as a transfer, and we don't sure what he's going to do just yet. He came in late during January, but he at Virginia was in contention for that starting goalie job. I know they have Matthew Nunes from one of the top recruits, but Gavin was up there. He was definitely in consideration with some of the experience he's had in the past. You have an experienced ACC goalie coming in, and that might have been a question mark, of course, with Drake Porter leaving. So that's one thing. The other thing, okay, now you say, who do you take out? I understand that that's also part of the equation, and you look at who is, 8, 9, 10, or the number, and 11, Penn, I'm going to talk about them in a second. You have Loyola, who I don't know if anybody's completely sold on. If you have Syracuse-Loyola, who do you think wins that game? Syracuse-Army, I feel like it's a similar feel between these two. So I can put them ahead of those two easily. Maybe I move Penn up. I'll talk about them a little bit later. But I feel like in this instance, you put Syracuse and say, I'm going to go think of a game and who's going to win that game. I'm probably going with Syracuse in the instance for both those teams.
And that was that's what I made in my media poll. I think they're higher. I will have a hard time. Now, if they lose a bunch of games here early, they lose to Army again, and then we can have a different conversation. I think it's a program that needed just kind of a refresh. And with Gary Gate coming in, Dave Petramala, the coaching staff, they've got some new recruits. Don't forget, Owen Hiltz had a fantastic freshman year. Like, be ready for him to just burst onto the scene, like as a really talented dude that was kind of just trying to find his way a year ago in terms of like a lot of different people trying to be a guy there at Syracuse. Look out for him. So I think this is going to be a year that there are some names on that Syracuse roster that become household names and put this team right back into the top 10.
And it comes down to the coaching. And, like, you can't get worse, in my estimation,
no.
of what they have coaching them, right? There's no way for that to
There's no way they're going downhill.
You're not going to get any worse.
Yeah. So, anyway, I'm with you with that surprise.
What's your biggest surprise? It sounds like you were just as surprised as I was.
I was very surprised. That was one of mine. But for me, it's the fact that High Point or Richmond, neither one of them is in the top 20 here in the media poll. Like, the SoCon Conference could have been the media darlings of the kind of mid-major type league, like a one-bid league. They've been the media darlings. But High Point, who brings back Asher Nolting, who's been one of the most talked about players over the last 3 years outside of the ACC programs, and Richmond brings back Ryan Lanchbury, who's another All-American candidate at attack, and neither one of them is in the top 20. Now, look, Bryant had a great end of the year, but they didn't win their conference in the regular season a year ago.
Right.
So I'm really surprised that two teams that we have talked about a ton, they have a really loaded schedule once again, both Richmond and High Point, in terms of an opportunity to win some non-conference games. I'm really surprised that one of them from the SoCon isn't in this top 20, because I think both of them are teams that you won good game against one of these teams. All of a sudden, they're in a conversation of being one of the top 15 teams in the league, and have been teams over the last couple of years that have been consistent top 20 teams.
Right.
I'm shocked that one of them did not end up. Now, High Point was in mine, but I'm shocked one of them didn't end up in that top 20. Both are receiving votes, but neither in the top 20 conversation.
And you look at a team like Johns Hopkins at 19, I feel like they have a lot more to prove than maybe those other two, and we don't really know too much about the Big Ten until we see what they can do out of conference this year after what schedule they played last year. So I think that's a team, like you said, Brian, I think is a good argument as well.
Vermont, another team that's kind of that has some things still to prove.
Yeah, and I think by nature of their schedule, especially High Points, for sure, getting into the top 20 won't be that difficult for them. So starting them there
against one of these teams,
starting them there might be the best idea for propensity's sake.
Yeah, so they're both teams that I would have in consideration, that not in the top 20. Surprise for me. Moving on, staying in this top 20, who's the team outside of that top 9, 10 in the country you think is the most dangerous?
Penn. I mentioned this earlier, and I think with Sam Hanley as your guy and knowing what he can do and change games and win
a wartime contender.
A wartime contender not in the top 10 doesn't feel right? I mean, you look at these top 10 teams, and all of them have one or two wartime contenders, and Sam Hanley, he's a guy that's certainly could be a top 5 guy, if not top 3, top 2.
Yeah.
He is the guy that can take them over the top. And then what they have, I think, on defense, and it's not the same core that we know Penn had a couple years ago when they made that run, but they have a couple of talented freshmen coming in. They have Patrick Birkinshaw at goal as well. And then they have that senior LSM, BJ Ferrari. And we know what an LSM can change a game too. And I love what they have in the back end. And I think that's really important considering their schedule to start the year. We talked about this in Ivy League week. Georgetown, Duke, Penn State, Villanova. Then in the Ivy League, of course, you got Princeton, Cornell, Yale. And if you win more than half of those games, I think there were 7 games I just named there, you're 4-3, Penn. You're in whatever place you want to be. You're top 10. You're a top 10 team if you win more than half of those games.
Wins.
And I think I think that's definitely within the realm of possibility for Penn.
Quite frankly, this is probably the hardest part of putting a poll together this year, is trying to figure out what we have in the Ivy League.
Absolutely.
And I
understand that too.
Yeah, and I do think, like, it's easy to forget that Penn as a team was this close to being in the Final Four a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
In that quarterfinal loss that was spectacular against Yale. And then that Sam Hanley didn't play the last time Penn really essentially took the field for a full season. I know they played a game last year, but Hanley wasn't part of that team because of dealing with some health issues. So you bring him back, I think it's easy to try to be like, we're not sure what we have. And so I think that's why we have Penn where they're at. And Yale, the fact that they've been to 2 national championship games in a row in the last 2 times they've played a full season, I think they get a little bit more of the benefit of the doubt. But the Ivy League is going to be so intriguing. Princeton found their way into the conversation here for the top 20. Cornell's in that conversation. Obviously, we just mentioned Yale and Penn. I am so intrigued because when we left in 2020, the Ivy League was looking like a league that could be like the ACC in terms of 2-3 teams in championship weekend. Now what do we have when we finally get them back? I think it's going to be fascinating.
I do
Harvard,
too.
Harvard's a team that could sneak up and talent-wise contend.
Right, and I think there's maybe understand the transfers and the limitations that the Ivy League had upon its athletes that impacted some things, but at the same time, there's still a lot of talent. It's not like all the talent. It's not like everybody left. There's still plenty of young guys and girls that were there a few years ago that are still there, and people that have wanted to come there that are incoming freshmen into some of these Ivy League schools. So I don't think, like we said, it might be a little bit of rust to start the year.
For sure.
Might be a couple losses as you scratch your head, but I think at the end of the year, they're going to be there.
And you don't think these teams, like a team like Yale, that like everybody just unenrolled, you don't think they're hungry to get back on the field?
Yeah.
Like, it was taken away. Not like everybody else, but they lost half the season, and that was awful. They lost a year and a half of college lacrosse where they were told, you can't play for that institution. You don't think they're going to be hungry?
Hunger is a definite factor
here. Yeah, for sure. Like, they're going to want it, and that says something. For me, I like the Penn answer. I also like Syracuse as a team that's scary. I really do think it was one of my bold predictions if you listen to the show a couple of weeks ago, Syracuse could make a Final Four this year. But I'm looking at Denver as a team that is sitting there at 12. I think they're tied with Syracuse there in the 12th spot in the preseason poll. But they have a faceoff guy in Alex Stathakis, who may be the second best faceoff guy outside of Michael Sisselberger in the entire country. I think in terms of the preseason All-American list, you kind of forget about him because T.D. Erlin came in and the two of them kind of split faceoffs down the rest of the season. And so he didn't have that consistent thing. Well, he's the guy.
And he's probably learned a lot from T.D.
Yeah, and before T.D. was in, he was the guy and was having a lot of success. Now, you can't fault Denver for wanting to bring in the guy who may be the best to ever do it in the college game, but Alex Stathakis is a terrific faceoff guy that is only going to get better, I think. So you have him. Their midfield is terrific with Jack Hanna and Alex Simmons, both guys that are All-American conversations. I think they've got a lot of pieces, and I really have a hard time thinking they're that far off of Georgetown. Remember, Denver beat Georgetown a year ago, and the Ethan Walker thing is a big question. You got to figure out who's that next guy at the attack position who can kind of fill that Ethan Walker type role. But I think having a team full of a bunch of really solid contributors offensively and then relying on Stathakis to get you the ball, I think that could work out actually well for Denver in terms of let Matt Brown just roll out what Matt Brown does as the offensive coordinator and go after it. I think they're probably Georgetown's biggest contender in the Big East. And don't be surprised if they knock off Georgetown in the regular season and have an opportunity to win the Big East tournament title.
And it does feel like they'll be more settled this year. They brought in the talent from the transfer portal and the Ivy League kids and all of that, which is fine. Like, you probably would have done the same thing.
For sure.
But now you have some of the continuity with guys that have been biding their time for certain roles and waiting for Ethan Walker and some of these guys to move on that have played together, you know, at least in practice and I guess now in the fall ball and all of that because they had to separate for a long time. But I just feel like it's almost I know things in the world aren't back to normal, but I'm sure at Denver, in particular, with what they had last year and all these different pieces, I think it might be feeling a little bit more normal there now, which will really help them be consistent this year.
And remember, they had a lot of depth last year that just never had the opportunity to see the field. It's another year for some of these recruits that got brought in, thought they might get a chance to play right away. Maybe they didn't, and now they'll have the opportunity to learn and get on the field now. I'm fascinated to see what Denver's got because I think they could be dangerous.
All right. It should be interesting for sure. All right. Let's transition to the women's side of things. The Inside Lacrosse women's section debuting their top 10 Tewaaraton watch list here this week. And, of course, Charlotte North's on top. So our question is, if not Charlotte North, who can win it? Is there anybody that can knock off Charlotte North in her reign after winning the Tewaaraton last spring?
This is such an interesting question, and I think the thing that stands out to me is the number of players that you see on that list that have a UNC next to their name. 5 of the top 10 are from North Carolina. That's ridiculous. Like that, you're talking about 5 of the top 10 players in the country are apparently playing for the same team. And so when I look at this breakdown, Charlotte North is spectacular, and I really do think she's only going to continue what she did a year ago, and she continues the stuff she's doing is continuing to change the women's game. So I think she's obviously in that conversation.
It's a front runner.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you look at this, and North Carolina has to be considered maybe the team to beat. Boston College brings back a lot, but North Carolina last year, even after they lost in the Final Four, I still think may have been the team to beat. BC just got them because BC had lost to North Carolina a couple times earlier in the year. So you say if they're going to play 10 times, North Carolina wins 7 or 8. So I think North Carolina is still the team, one of the teams to beat here nationally. And if North Carolina wins the title and Charlotte North doesn't break all of her records, which is a lot to do, I have a hard time thinking that somebody from North Carolina, if this list, whether it's Olivia Dirks, Ali Mastriani, Emma Trenchard, Taylor Moreno, Jamie Ortega, Andy Aldave, a transfer from Notre Dame, another player who could be in that conversation. You're talking about 6 players who all could be that player. I just would have a hard time if North Carolina wins thinking it's going to go to somebody else, especially after Charlotte North has already won one.
I think if it's close, you might also get the feel of a Jamie Ortega who's been outstanding since she stepped on campus.
Been a two-time finalist.
She was unbelievable. It could also be that if, of course, North Carolina goes, and whether they win it, the championship or not, but that they're in championship weekend, and if it's close, it could be the Ortega career achievement type feel as well. I think that also gives her a little bit of a leg up just because she's had such a great career. She just does deserve it, you know?
I mean, and let's be honest, Charlotte North is great, but for her to score 100 goals again,
well, it's going to be tough.
She has set such a high bar. The expectations for Charlotte North this year are, I don't know if we've ever seen anything like it.
No.
I mean, you're talking about Taylor Cummings' level of transcending the women's sport, in which Taylor Cummings just seemed to dominate every game in which she played.
Yeah,
and that is what the expectation is for Charlotte North again.
And her group around her is a little different this year. A touch, not much different, but at the same time, there are some new faces. Her role might be a little bit changed, but depending on who has the ball in their stick on the daily basis, whether you've got some high recruits coming in. And I think that could change the dynamic a bit. Not that that would make Charlotte North any less prolific. Right. It just might change things a bit, and that's sort of what you have to do on a yearly basis. You hear these coaches tell us all the time, oh, it's a new season. This isn't the same team as last year. It's a whole new team despite all the people that come back. So I think that's also something to consider with North and trying to win this again and how hard it is to win it twice in a row.
And I think it's a lot of respect to what Taylor Cummings did in winning 3 years in a row, how just absurd that is. But also I think it goes back to, on top of Taylor Cummings being great, she was on the team that everybody knew was probably the most talented in the country every one of those years. I think North Carolina has an argument that they may be the most talented team. Not that BC's very far behind, but I do think Carolina might be the most talented team here this year.
Well, if they win it, then yes, that they would be able to
out.
prove that.
Yeah,
my other argument would be Emily Harishuk. And, of course, her health and being 100% is so big, but we have seen athletes been able to come back and be almost at 100% from these type of injuries. And don't forget, in 2019, she had an argument to win it. I know, you look at what happened in the Final Four and all of that, but she had an argument. She had the stats up there to be a finalist, mind you. So Emily Harishuk coming back and playing once again, she can go right into her role and really take things over once again because she has the talent to do that. Don't forget, in that 2020 season, she had played in 5 games, 27 goals, 3 assists. She had 15 draws. So that's how good she was before the pandemic. Of course, she only played 1 game last year. I understand that. But she's going to be hungry, as is Syracuse with Kayla Traynor at the helm. And I believe that they are on a track, Syracuse as well. We talk about towards team success, how they are hand in hand. Syracuse is one of those teams that is like this, kind of like we saw Boston College do. I know they made it year after year after year, but you felt like they were still ascending in those years. Syracuse is still on that ascension, and the higher they go, the higher Emily Harishuk can go, and I think she'll have something to say about this tour time this year regardless. She does it all, which I think is important too, sort of the Sam Apuzzo type. You do get the feeling that Syracuse is just they're the next team that's going to break through. Yeah. If there's the next team that's going to win that first championship, it's Syracuse. They're that BC thing. It's you get there, you're knocking on the door.
finally you just got to bang the door down and break it down.
For them, it
obviously,
was a finally feel, you know?
Yeah, they just broke it down. They beat North Carolina and they broke it down.
Absolutely.
BC.
All right, let's move on. We're going to talk conferences now. Let's go with the Big Ten this week. We got the American coming up for the women after our interviews, but Big Ten men, Travis, who is your favorites, if I have to ask?
Oh, man. This actually isn't that very hard for me at all.
Yeah.
It's Maryland. I mean, this team ran through this conference. Not only did they go undefeated in the league, which is a big-time deal any year, but they went undefeated having to play everybody twice.
And they did that with Jared Bernhardt.
I know, but still.
What's your argument for this year?
But there was a dominance about this team a year ago.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And they just seemed like there was a larger gap than we've seen in a long time between Maryland and everybody else. And I know they lost Jared Bernhardt, but they do bring a lot back, and they brought in a bunch of transfers. Obviously, Logan Wisnauskas is the new #1. He's now going to be the focal point. I'll be interested to see how he deals with the increased attention because, look, nobody's the athlete of Jared Bernhardt. He is we saw it on the football field. He's a special, special athlete. But I think Logan Wisnauskas is a really, really special player. You still got Bubba Fairman. You add in Jonathan Donville offensively. We talked about it when we were talking about this Maryland team before in terms of transfers. I'm really fascinated to see Keegan Kahn now as a third or fourth option offensively. What can he do? Because for Villanova, he was a #1 or 2 option for the Wildcats throughout his career. So now he's getting the third, fourth, maybe fifth defender when you're looking at a scouting report for Maryland. I'm going to be really interested with what Keegan Kahn can do and take advantage of there. And then don't forget, they've got a first-team All-American at short-stick defensive midfielder in Roman Puglisi, which is always a big thing, especially when you're talking about the Big Ten and the ACC. Who do you have that can match up against some of those second and third midfielders, who's not going to get the long pull, not going to take the LSM, who's going to pick those guys up? He's terrific.
As deep as those midfields are, absolutely.
Yeah, and then in the midfield for them, they've got on top of Donville, who's an All-American candidate transferring in, you got Kyle Long and Anthony DeMeo coming back. I mean, defensively, you can't. Brett Makar, Matt Rahill, Owen Probilski transfers in. I mean, you couldn't, they're entire roster of guys that are at some point, because of they've been playing on championship weekend for so long, are almost household names that you know. And anytime you go through that, it's hard to pick anybody else. Maryland's my team.
We talked about this a few weeks ago, but you'd think if Maryland had 2 more minutes in the championship game, we're probably talking about them as the defending champs right now.
Yeah.
They should have been in the Final Four 10 of the last 11 years. The 1 year I'm counting is that quarterfinal year, the Virginia, the net game, whatever. But
that wasn't a goal.
You know, and you wonder, you've been there that many times, they have 1 title in that span.
Yeah.
And I
Matt
think
Rambo,
that's certainly something that's probably hanging a bit over the heads of this program and a lot of these guys, maybe why some are transferring in. You sort of got that sense when we talked to Logan Wisnauskas a few days ago. There's a hunger and a chip on the shoulder, which for a program this successful, that doesn't always come with it. I mean, there's an expectation there, but I feel like with this Maryland team, there's a cockiness, a chip on the shoulder saying, okay, it's our time now. We have to do this. So, of course, Maryland's my pick as well.
Yeah.
Because of all the reasons you just mentioned. Don't forget their goalie, Logan McNaney.
He's back.
9.89 goals against average, top 20 in the country last year. He's another really talented player. The question is who is going to get them in the Big Ten, right? Is there going to be a team that can come and compete with them in the Big Ten? And you do look at Johns Hopkins.
They competed with them last year at the end of the year.
They did, and that's sort of the way Johns Hopkins has worked the last few
seasons.
True, you're right. An interesting dynamic there. But you look at Michigan, are they ready to take a next step just yet? And I go to Penn State. I talked to Granny Men, and the kid knows more about Penn State lacrosse than most. And he was very high on just sort of the rebirth of this program because like when we were talking about it with him, he said, yeah, you had that core group that was there for a number of years. They started as freshmen, a lot of them, and now they move on. Who is next? And sometimes that can be really good for a program and surprise some teams. I mean, the scouting reports are gone now, right? For Penn State. You've got a really good quarterback role like attackman coming in Will Peden. He's a Malvern Prep guy, so he can maybe take that mantle of the Grant A. Ment type and maybe go under the tutelage of A. Ment as well. And you have Drac Trainer, one of the quickest guys in lacrosse, and can get to anywhere he wants on the field. So you have some of these undercurrent players that are the sort of the next coming at Penn State. And with Tambroni there at the helm, I have a lot of faith in that.
Yeah.
And a lot of faith in their ability to recycle and continue to be a program that competes on a yearly basis.
And I do think the Big Ten as a whole is going to be very competitive. I think Maryland is kind of up there. I think they're on a level by themselves at the moment. But I think everybody else, when you look at Rutgers, Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, Hopkins, they all have a lot of talent. Now there are just a lot of question marks. How do you bring it together? They all have athletes that can compete in this conference.
Yeah.
They all got talent. How do you bring it together in order to get to the level of Maryland? I think that's the biggest question in this league this year is who of those other teams, who can take that next step and compete with the Terps.
Yeah, we talked to Nick Myers, and they have a lot coming back, too.
They do.
For Ohio
Tons.
State. I mean, they've got, of course, as we know, a great culture. Just for them, no Ryan Tarafenko worries me a bit. I feel like he is so important to what they did for a long time. It's hard to replace that in 1 year.
Yeah.
Right? It's hard to just fill that hole because he filled so many holes. So that's another team to keep an eye on. But I do like Penn State and TJ Malone, another guy, too, that I make sure I need to mention here, as he led them in points last year, even with Matt O'Keefe on his team. So it's going to be fun. There's going to be battles. And even Granny men were like, yeah, the Big Ten playing each other twice was a gauntlet. And
brutal.
You look at it, he goes, yeah, the style in the ACC, like it's fast and exciting. But that might have been, I guess, a little bit easier to do than going in the Big Ten and playing each other twice in terms of the battle and the physicality that you have as a part of that brand of lacrosse.
And we're going to learn more about these Big Ten teams, especially ones outside of Maryland, when they play all these other teams throughout the year. Like Rutgers battling teams, and Ohio State's schedule is loaded with teams like Denver and Harvard. So I do think we're going to learn more out of conference for the Big Ten this year, which will be really important. The out-of-conference games for the Big Ten this year may be more important than in years past because of the fact they didn't play them last year.
It's going to be a fascinating year.
Really is.
It's going to be really interesting.
We're back.
For a lot of reasons. With the Ivy League, we don't really know a lot. Feels like we know more in other years. We want to know, but we don't. It's really cool. All right, let's go to the women's side of things. I'm going to pick Maryland for the women, and we're going to talk about
about being back.
We're going to talk to Aurora accordingly here in a little bit. And I think everybody, I don't know if it's a hush-hush thing, but everyone's like, Maryland last year, what happened? It's almost it's kind of a...
Oh, no, they didn't make the Final Four.
It is. I mean, the expectation, just like we talked about with the men's program, is there. And I have a lot of faith in them with what they have coming back. And Aurora, of course, offensively for them is such a dynamic scorer. Abby Bosco coming over from Penn. She was an All-American defender there before, of course, the Ivy League shut everything down. So they've got transfers coming in a lot of different ways, and including returning Hannah Lubecker, their leading attacker from a year ago. Maddie McSally now trying to find her place after replacing Megan Taylor. So I like their recruiting, 3 in the top 10 in the Iowa Women Power 100. There's a lot coming back for Maryland, and I think this is the year where they sort of get their swagger back a bit. And I think Aurora accordingly, we're going to talk to you in a bit, is a big part of that too.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing when you hear this interview with Aurora that she hit on was the fact that she actually has some experience that some of the Maryland players don't. I mean, this is still a pretty young roster of Maryland players that haven't had a full normal season of college lacrosse, because we mentioned the whole Big Ten thing. They only played Big Ten games last year. So this is, if you're a freshman last year or even in 2020, you haven't played a full season of college lacrosse the way we know it. So I think her leadership on top of her talent is going to be important for this team. But I'm going to go with Northwestern. Even without Izzy Skane, I'm going to pick the Wildcats. I have some faith in them. And you know what? I think without Izzy Skane, it's going to be even more interesting to watch this Wildcats.
I mean, they did lose Lindsey McCone, too.
They do, but they have Lauren Gilbert coming back.
Yes.
You got Erin Coy-Kendall, who's one of the top assist players in the entire country, also back. That's a nice dynamic up front. And I really like some of the youth and the defense they have. Their whole defensive unit is back. Allie Palermo, Brennan Dwyer, Jill Girardi, all there. And
good
then
on the draw, too.
Yeah, and they bring in a couple of McDonald's All-Americans, freshmen, a pair of Samanthas, Samantha White and Samantha Smith. And Leah Holmes was a sophomore last year as part of that U.S. U19 team. I mean, when you have Izzy Skane, some of these players can kind of fly under the radar. You can't forget that Northwestern recruits with the best of them, as does Maryland.
Yeah.
But just because a player at the top end is injured and can't be there doesn't mean they don't have people who can fill that role. I will be fascinated to see some of the young players for the Wildcats and how they now with some experience can have an opportunity to contend. And look, you know what you're going to get with Northwestern. This is a program that just reloads. And so you lose Izzy's game, which is a big loss. Maybe they don't have that Tewaaraton finalist, but I think they can contend and possibly win the Big Ten.
Yeah, and you look at what Syracuse did last year after losing Emily Arishok, and they seemed
incredible.
Like it was an insane run at the end of the day. And the brand I think Northwestern plays can get that next girl up mentality for sure, in which someone can fill the hole, maybe not the Izzy Skane hole as she made everything go, but now they've had some time. I mean, I think that's important too.
You're right.
Because they've had practices here in the spring.
It's not like it happened in January.
That's my thought exactly. It happened in, mid-December, late November even? It happened during fall ball. So they've had time to adjust, and I have a lot of faith in what that program is all about to know that they should be okay. I don't think they're going to beat Maryland, but I think they should be okay.
Don't forget, Madison Dossett is back in goal as well.
Yes.
So they've got a lot coming back.
They do.
I know they lost some offense, but they've got a lot defensively, which is important, and let some of these youngsters have a chance.
So those will be the two at the top for sure.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Anyway, speaking about the Big Ten, we're going to talk with Aurora Cordingling from Maryland now. So now we head to the Big Ten, and we've got Aurora Cordingling now with Maryland joining us. First off, Aurora, you transfer from Hopkins to Maryland, so you're in conference. And it probably goes without saying because you're at Maryland now, and everybody knows what that program is. But why Maryland? Why was that the right spot for you to transfer to?
Yeah, I think just the moment that I got on the phone with Kathy, I knew that this was a place that I wanted to be in. I think the 15 national championships speak for itself. The culture that she's created here, it's just so special and so competitive, but everyone is just amazing people off the field too. So I just knew that, after I got off the phone with her, even that first time, that this was the place that I wanted to be for my 5th year.
That had to be it's got to be a cool thing to be able to say. Like, you played for Janine Tucker, of course, for all those years, and now Kathy as well. That's a pretty neat experience to have in college.
Yeah, for sure. 2 of the best, honestly, both such empowering and motivating women. So really great role models for me, and I just am so lucky.
You have kind of the unusual of experience that, the landscape of the Big Ten because you've been playing in it for 4 years. What's it like to transfer in conference and now to be teammates with players that you've been battling with, and especially a couple of times last year?
Yeah, it's definitely weird because we did play them, 3 times last year. So I'm obviously no stranger just to the Big Ten in general. So as weird as it is kind of being on the same team as girls that I've been playing against for the past 4 years, it's unique. I'm used to the Big Ten, I kind of know what to expect. And, this is a young team that we have this year. So I can, provide the, leadership role in our offense. There's 3 classes of athletes on our team that haven't really had a normal year of college lacrosse. So I think that's where I can kind of step in and kind of help lead the way there.
Have you been able to get a feel for that standard, like you mentioned, the championships and all that Maryland has, and moving forward here this season?
Yeah, for sure. Our practices are so competitive, and, even on the practice field, we have the banner at the end of the field that has every single, national championship and conference championship there. So it's just really cool and motivating, and, everyone's bought into the same goal here, which is really special.
You said motivating. Is it intimidating at all? Pressure, all that?
No, not at all. I think, this year it's unique. Maryland lacrosse, obviously, for the first time last year in 11 years, didn't make a Final Four. So I think a lot of people are doubting us. So, we have nothing to lose. And I think everyone's just, again, so motivated and ready just to prove the world wrong.
Now, I was reading through your bio that you're a fan of long-distance running, and I feel like for most athletes in sports, the reason they play sports is so they don't have to run. Where did the love of running come from?
Well, my mom actually ran marathons when I was younger, so I would grow up going to her races. But I think during COVID, when I had nothing to do, I was in Canada, so it was really strict, even more so strict than the US. So I didn't really have anything to do. So I just picked it up on the side, and it just helped me, take some hours out of the day and just get myself off the couch.
That's great. I mean, Travis is running the Boston Marathon here.
Yeah.
I ran the New York City Marathon back in November. What is your sort of scale and all that? Do you have goals when it comes to these things? We're all in the same mindset here.
I think eventually, I definitely want to do that after lacrosse. I mean, it's not the smartest to be doing like long distance running while, playing such a high impact sport, but definitely post grad is something I want to do for sure.
It's awesome.
Yeah. What kind of distances were you running during COVID? I'm sure it's different now, but like when you weren't on the field.
Yeah, I did a half marathon, and I actually did one a few weeks ago with my best friend, just for fun. We decided to run one Saturday morning. We were bored, so I definitely want to get up to the marathon, but obviously that's going to take a while to get there.
Yeah, it's a jump. Like, I'm not gonna lie, it's a jump, but it's a fun jump when you're ready to do it.
Mm-hmm.
You obviously come from a background of great lacrosse as well, and your dad at Troy was a great player north of the border in the NLL. Coming up in Canada as a women's player, like how much box experience did you also have on your way up?
Yeah, so there actually wasn't any field lacrosse program when I grew up. So I started playing boys box lacrosse, especially like with my dad and his relationship to the box game. That was kind of inevitable. Like when I, was born, I had a stick in my hand. So playing with the boys obviously like helped a lot with just like playing at a quicker pace. Obviously they were a lot stronger than me. So I played that for a few years, and then I just transitioned to the women's field game when my town got a club.
How'd you feel about it? Did you enjoy it?
I liked it, but when I started getting older and I was getting beat up in the box, it wasn't as fun. So definitely more of a fan of girls field lacrosse than that. But it is really fun to watch because it's so fast paced.
I mean, there is that movement now. Of course, Dana Dobie, has been part of that big movement, and Amber Hill of putting box lacrosse into the World Championship schedule. That could be a cool. Obviously, you're part of Team Canada. It might be a cool thing to aspire to, right?
Yeah, for sure. I've definitely thought about it, but that probably won't happen for a few more years. But Dana's been doing such an amazing way, like leading the way and kind of growing the game. And a game is something that she's like so passionate about in the box game because it's not really that popular around the world. So it's definitely exciting seeing it being picked up by a bunch of different countries.
Yeah.
With your dad, you've obviously grown up amongst Canada's lacrosse circles. Who were the players, whether it's men's or women's, that you looked up to growing up in terms of trying to emulate things from their games?
Yeah, you just said her name, Dana Dobie, obviously one of the most iconic women's lacrosse players in Canada. She's just been such a great role model to me, and now that I finally get to play with her at the national level, it's so surreal. I look up to her so much, and I've learned so much just playing with her. So it's just been amazing.
What's it about her, that makes her so special?
So passionate, but then has so much empathy, and she's such a warm leader. She really, she could be someone that it doesn't have to be nice to everyone just because she has all these accolades and she's one of the best in the world, but she really just is so empathetic and really takes you under her wing, no matter your age or how many levels you've played at. She's amazing.
Did that have anything to do with your decision to go play at Maryland?
Yeah, for sure. No, we actually talked about it, and same with Erica Evans. Us three are like the three Terps on the Canadian national team, so that's definitely a special bond that we have.
That's great.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to play a factor. With the Canadian national team, you were one of I think the youngest player on that 2015 U19 championship team, and for the people here in the United States, they talk about that as like the year Canada really broke out in terms of the women's game. It was such a big moment for not only the U19 program, but for the Canadian lacrosse as a whole. What was it like to be part of that gold medal winning team back in 2015?
For sure. So special, especially being the youngest on the team. I got to learn from so many amazing players. A lot of our team had already had a couple of years of college experience, so that was really cool. I was only think 15 or 16 when I was on the team. So, I had this exposure to like higher level lacrosse, and it was really cool to be able to just learn and play with so many people that I look up to.
How much does that excite you for this summer?
I'm so excited. We just played at the U.S. Lacrosse, obviously, a few months ago, and really exciting. We had our first win against the U.S. ever in program history in the sixes format. So definitely a bright future for Canada Lacrosse.
Well, I think that's all I have. Tom, you got anything else?
Aurora, appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on. We're so excited to see what you do in Maryland this year. Obviously, the Johns Hopkins career was fantastic, and now you sort of get to put a nice exclamation point on things, I'd imagine, right?
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
So it is Graham Bundy Jr. who joins us now. Graham, back on campus, it looks like, for the semester. What's the vibe of the team been like? I mean, you guys are so close to getting the season started.
Yeah, I think we have an awesome group of guys with a extremely positive attitude that we're just eager to get back on campus with each other. Practice has been going well. We've been pretty juiced up. I think we have a very exciting schedule and a great group of dudes. So just again, eager to get out there and excited to compete.
Obviously, there's always excitement leading into a year, but I have to think how last year ended for you guys only makes you want to get back on the field that much more. Like, what did you learn from the NCAA tournament a season ago?
Yeah, I mean, I just think that we had kind of highs and lows throughout this season. I thought we hit a pretty high after our Syracuse game. We kind of thought we were clicking, we're figuring things out, and it just kind of tore apart for us in that next game. So I think kind of just consistency is something that we have been emphasizing, and just making sure that we don't get too high on ourselves and don't get too low. But yeah, there's just so many learning experiences in those games, and we're just excited that we didn't push that behind us, but it's always going to be in the back of our head, but just making sure that we learn from our mistakes when they happen and use that to kind of push us past maybe a hump that we come along this season.
Did you watch that game right away, or did you take time before you went back, or did you even ever look at it again?
I mean, I looked at bits and pieces of it. I hate looking at those. I mean, you got to do it just because there's obviously stuff that we didn't do right and I didn't do right, and a lot of learning opportunities, but yeah, those are tough ones to look back upon. You're never in a great mood when you're looking back on those. So you gotta pick out a day when maybe you're not having the best day and you're just like, all right, this is not having a great day right now. I'll look at the film and just get through it. But it is what it is.
Did you see anything like in Virginia that day that you're like, oh, this is maybe what we have to sort of replicate, on there, because obviously they've won the last couple times. Is there something that you saw out of them that you say, okay, maybe we can look and learn from that a little bit too?
Yeah, I mean, I just think they played with confidence. They've had those runs in the playoffs. They have some veteran guys and some great leadership. So I just think they were cool, calm, and collected going into that game. And we had a guy banged up, our face-off guy, JR. So kind of that took some wind out of our sails. And I just think that we let some of those smaller things get to us, and just staying cool, calm, and collected was something that we kind of took away from that game that I think we could use to help us here in the future.
Yeah, what kind of identity do you guys want to have this year? Because it feels like you were able to, especially last year, put up points in big numbers, but also you had some days where your defense would be as stout as they go. And everyone obviously talking about your defense and what you have back and what coming in there this year. What kind of identity do you guys sort of focus on as a team heading into this spring?
Yeah, I mean, our identity, I think our team, I have a bunch of buddies on different teams, and I just think that our team prides ourselves on the relationships that we hold and build. And if you start there as one of your main pillars, I mean, everything on the field, practices, weight rooms, games, it's all so much fun. So I think something that we want to be characterized as a team that's just out there having fun with their best buddies. And I think our defense is stellar. Every practice we're going against, in my opinion, the best defense in the country. So you're competing back and forth, throwing chirps to each other during practice. And so I just think we want to be characterized as that team that has fun. Our defense is clicking on all cylinders like they always do. Our offense can bury some goals, and we're just out there having fun with each other.
Yeah, I mean, you go up against a goalie like Owen, and then you have, of course, Will come in and Gibson Smith. What's it like going against that defense? I wanted to ask you that anyway every day.
Yeah. I mean, they're phenomenal. It's just we have so many good defensemen that it makes, like I said, we're going against the best defense every single day. So it is really humbling when you enter in a little slump there, just because you're going against the best guys. But it makes those goals a lot more sweet, and it's not rare to see our offense celebrating our goals in practice and our defense throwing some checks around, bodies around. I mean, it's just a great time because you're going against the best in the country.
You mentioned buddies and some chirping, which brings up the fact that your brother Crawford is now one of your teammates there at Georgetown. I gotta ask, because there's a little bit of gap there. Is it he's around you all the time? Is there some distance? What's that situation for you?
Yeah, no, it's awesome. He's a great kid. We've had a really close relationship since we were little. There's 4 of us boys in my family, so there's always been that team atmosphere of tough love. So I see him all the time, but he's good. He hangs out with his class, builds his relationships, and hangs out with some of my buddies even when I'm not there. I'm like, yo, what are you up to today? You want to go to the cafeteria or whatever? He's like, oh, I'm eating with your roommates. And I'm like, okay, well, thanks for the invite there. He's gelling perfectly with the guys, and he'll come to our place for some Monday night, Thursday night, Sunday night football games. But yeah, I see him a good amount, but he's doing a good job of getting comfortable with the other guys on the team as well.
So you bring up football, and I want to ask. I mean, the Rams left, so you're a guy from Missouri. Who do you have? Are they your team, or what's the allegiance there?
Yeah, so I kind of get buried for. I don't have a real NFL allegiance. So the Rams organization, when they were in St. Louis, it wasn't the owner wasn't very nice to us, and the organization just wasn't great. But I mean, Sean McVay and Cooper Kupp's my favorite player. So I think it's very cool to see them. But a lot of people in St. Louis, as well as myself, have picked up a liking for the Chiefs just because they are from Missouri. So it's cool to see them play too. They just have it's so much fun to watch them. I mean, that game last night was one of the most bizarre things I've ever seen. And just watching kind of the different things that they're able to run with their personnels, no matter if you like them or not, it's a cool game to watch. So kind of those are just 2 teams that I've really liked and enjoy watching.
You're a smart man. You just get to sit there and enjoy the games as opposed to having to painfully watch your team find a way to lose.
Oh yeah, some of my best buddies my roommates are actually diehard Lions fan and diehard Ravens fans. And with the Ravens injury, he's like, "What is their training staff doing? Checks them. They're getting hurt left and right, freaking out." And the Lions guy, he's just happy to see a field goal go through the uprights. So.
You mentioned St. Louis, and growing up in the Midwest for a lacrosse player of your stature is not normal. There haven't been a lot of you that have come out of the Midwest and gone on to what you've done, whether in your high school career or now in college. Obviously, your dad had something to do with that, with him playing in North Carolina. But what was it like growing up in St. Louis, playing this sport? And I have to imagine that there weren't a lot of other people that knew about lacrosse that were surrounded you.
Oh yeah. So, I mean, it's obviously not as big of a hotbed, but my parents, I'll kind of start with my family. I mean, my brothers have always been super competitive. We had a lacrosse stick in our hands pretty early. So my dad was awesome about that, and going out and playing with my brothers was a lot of fun. We had a kind of a small group of guys that were really inspired to play at the next level. So I pride that, kind of my close-knit friend group and older or younger guys that really wanted to go out there and get some extra work in, and were really aspiring to do things at the next level. So I credit them for being out there when it was raining, sleeting, snowing, whatever it was. Those are some guys that, because it's hard if you're by yourself if you don't want to go to the weight room, if you don't want those extra shots, it's easy for you to be like, all right, I'm going to take the day off. But if you have a guy that's like, hey, let's go get shots, and you're like, all right, perfect, I'm in. So whether you're in a slump or someone else is, it's easy to kind of pick each other up. So that was awesome, having kind of a close group of friends that were committed to bettering themselves on the field. That was awesome. And then, I mean, my parents just took me to so many different places. I mean, I think there's a little over 100 days in the summer. I think I spent 4 days at home. So I was in California, West Coast Stars, going up to Baltimore, doing a lot of different things in the Northeast. So, I mean, my parents made a lot of sacrifices to allow me to travel and get as much exposure into the hotbeds as possible.
Was there any transition in feeling comfortable, like in those environments, knowing that you weren't from one of those places? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, again, like Georgetown, I think I'm someone who values relationships heavily, and so just making sure that I was making the most of every time, because you'll see some teams that you're on that aren't from the same area. Like West Coast Stars has a lot of guys from different areas. West Coast Stars does a great job of, in between these games, you're bonding with your guys. Everyone's you'll go get a sandwich somewhere together, and then you're coming back before the game, doing your pregame stuff together. I mean, some other teams, you'll have guys who are like the showcases. Maybe you're having guys that are going in their car, talking to their parents in between the games or whatnot. I just think it's extremely important in those situations to get kind of as close as you can to those guys, and making sure that you spend time between games with them, just so you build a relationship, because it's really hard to play when you don't have a relationship or chemistry with anyone on the team.
That's a great lesson for a lot of young kids right there, right? I mean,
Sure.
I'm sure that's something you want to pass along.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, valuing those relationships and taking the time. I mean, you have you have a lot of time with your parents, so making sure that you spend those time between games with your buddies and building those connections and fostering that culture will pay off in the long run, in my opinion.
Listening to you talk right there about relationships has to be making your U.S. now U21 coach Nick Myers smile, because I'm like hearing him in the back of my head as I'm listening to you, because that is something that he has made like a big focal point of that team. I know it's been now a couple of years in the making, but what's it been like to be part of this U.S. now U21 squad and hopefully get the opportunity to play in Ireland this summer?
Yeah, it's been awesome. I mean, the trial process was it was long and it was tough in those days. Some of them were hot, but I mean, you have some of the best guys in the country and the best coaches, the best training staff in the country helping you out. And so it was a lot of fun. You're just taking in a bunch of information. It's overwhelming at times, but just something that we emphasize, just being grateful. Grateful for everything and entitled to nothing is one of the mottos that we use. So just kind of taking in the situation that you're in, being grateful and not entitled to, oh, I made the next cut, I get these shirts and the new gear or whatever it is. It's like, all right, no, I'm grateful to be here. There's people who can't play any sports due to an illness or a disability. And it's like, you just take those little things for granted. And so we really emphasize not taking those opportunities for granted. But yeah, I'm just extremely grateful that Ireland's back on the table, because there was a time where we were off, it was getting pushed back, we were off again, canceled, and then back on. And then we're like, okay, hopefully things keep its course and we end up in Ireland come August 10th. But we're just extremely excited.
Have you ever been to Ireland?
I've not. My dad has played a lot of golf there, so he's really excited. We scheduled, I think, he's been 2 years, 3 years looking at golf courses, and he may be more excited than I am, and I am ecstatic to go there. But he's like, we're doing these golf courses, and when I'm out with him, I play a good amount of golf with him, and my game's pretty solid, but I hit a very high ball with like a lot of spin, and my dad's like, buddy, like that works here in St. Louis, Missouri. That's not cutting it in Ireland. It's not going to cut it. And I'm like, oh God, I need to iron things out here.
You got to work on those low, like cut down Tiger Woods-esque shots, like
stingers.
Keep them low. The stinger. There it is.
Yeah, just gotta watch a lot of film, and yeah, I have my clubs up here, so just a couple practice reps in the living room will do the trick, I think, because I won't have much time to get out on the course.
Like, what's your handicap? Does junior beat senior? Like when you get out there, what's the dynamic like?
Yeah. So right now I'm at like a 4 handicap.
Oh.
But my dad's he smokes the ball. He's a big lefty, and he just cranks it. He's really good. He's been able to shoot. I think he on his best round can shoot lower than I can. But we compete pretty heavily with each other. When I get out there a good amount, I think I can beat him every now and then. But he has the ability. He has numerous hole-in-ones. He can drive the ball over 300 yards, reach every par 5 and 2, and
Okay.
So decent.
Yeah, he's a stud. Yeah.
Wow.
You're underselling your game. A 4 handicap is what most people dream of, man.
I mean, yeah, I credit COVID for that.
That's
I mean,
fair.
there's not many great things came out of the pandemic, but that was definitely one of them. And I was out there walking the course 6 times a week. I would play every day except for Monday because the course was closed. And yeah, you're just out there, headphones in, enjoy the time out on the course. And I was able to kind of work on my bunker shots. There's not many times where people are like, oh, I'm going to work on my bunker shots. Like you kind of just want to step up there and hit your driver for 30 minutes and be like, oh, I feel good about myself. And then back in the car. But I mean, I kind of fell in love with just being out there by myself and working on those little things, a short game, my irons. So it was just a lot of fun for me. And I started to play a bunch, and my handicap started to fall a little bit, which was awesome.
You have a favorite golfer? I mean, we might as well keep talking about golf here.
I mean,
Who do you like?
I love Tiger. Tiger's awesome to watch. I mean, everyone's going to say Tiger, but I mean, I like the Koepka DeChambeau beef that they have going on. So that's always entertaining. I like a lot of golfers. Phil Mickelson's awesome to watch. Those when they do those, I think they do like 2 PGA players and then 2 other athletes, like they did Peyton Manning or whatever that is. I mean, I just think those are extremely entertaining. Phil Mickelson is, he's awesome. He's a good dude. My dad loves him. So I grew up really respecting his game. But yeah, there's not many golfers that I don't like.
It's interesting you say Tiger, Graham, because obviously you're younger, and I'm over 30, and at 33 years old, I grew up watching him dominate, and I feel badly for those that didn't and see like this version of Tiger, because I'm like, Tiger, like peak Tiger, you've never seen anything like it. Hopefully it sounds like you've seen some highlights and realize that too, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, his highlights are incredible. I mean, the way he put himself in a bad situation, always bail himself out somehow. But I was able to, so I belong out of Bellerive in St. Louis. So we hosted the 2018 PGA Championship, the 100th PGA Championship. And that's the one that Koepka took home. But Tiger was making a push there towards the end. He might have been 2 strokes back with 3 or 4 holes to play. And I mean, it is crazy. You could be anywhere within a couple miles of the course and where Tiger is. The crowd is obnoxiously loud wherever Tiger is. You're like, oh, Tiger just made a putt, and you're like 8 holes away from wherever he is. So it was pretty remarkable to see kind of the following that he has and the stuff that he was able to do, the way he handled the crowd. So yeah, he's my dad, again, big golfer. So he followed Tiger growing up. So yeah, I've always had a liking for the guy.
So I'll bring this back to lacrosse off of that. Who's the guy, like growing up or even now, like who's the guy, drop everything, if there's one player that you could watch play in lacrosse, either whether there's grown up or right now, who's that guy?
I don't really know. I've watched a bunch of film. I mean, I've watched a bunch of film and highlights on guys, but I haven't really had a guy that I'm like, this is exactly who I want to be. My dad's always been kind of my mentor and one of my heroes. So just going out there and competing, I've never been a guy to think I want to be the next version of this guy. I kind of want to create my own path. And that was part of the reasons why I didn't end up at Carolina and found a great home here at Georgetown. I mean, I just want to I have a lot of mentors and want to take kind of what they say and create my own path with it. So I look up to a lot of those guys, but I don't, there's not one guy that I can pick out that I want to emulate their games. I mean, I watch a lot of Jay Carraway film now, and I'm a big fan of his when he's there. Dan Bucaro, I mean, he's a stud. So a lot of those Georgetown guys who brought me into this family and made me feel very much at home have been guys that I look up to. And but yeah, they're just little plays where I'm like, okay, this play is something I want to work on. This move that this guy did. I mean, Tucker Dordovic is a good friend of mine, and some of his moves, like just those little things that you can see guys who are playing or guys who played in the past. You just take those little things and try to emulate that, or like, this is what I'm going out on the field and work for 30 minutes. So I just take those little plays rather than the players themselves.
Yeah, impressive. Really rings true about you, Graham. The attention to detail, it feels like, in a lot of the things you do, like even talking about golf, it feels like you bring that into lacrosse as well, and sort of just the way your whole game sort of comes together. It feels like every single thing is really important to you.
Yeah, it's just the little things. If you aren't able to do those little things, they pile up pretty quickly. So just kind of staying on top of those little things and making sure that you are aware of the situation that you're in and kind of how to handle it properly. I mean, it definitely helps when you have great roommates, great family, great friends that act as a great supporting cast for you. So that kind of definitely makes my life easier and makes me stay level-headed and keep a narrow focus on what needs to be done in the task at hand.
You talk about that path you wanted to carve out, sort of in your own image and likeness. What do you want to be able to say about that when it's all said and done? In the near and in the far future, about your career and your legacy.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to be a guy that younger guys look up to, and older guys or guys in my class can call me whenever they need. There's not much that I want to be said about kind of on the lacrosse field. I want to be someone who was accountable and trustworthy and just an honest guy that people can 20 years from now call up and just catch up, grab a drink somewhere, grab dinner, meet families, all that good stuff. I mean, there's just so many. Lacrosse is a big part of my life, but down the road, there's going to be so many bigger things. And again, relationships is something that I pride, and those are just something that will last forever. And I hope that these guys on my team, whether it's the USA team or Georgetown, or even guys like Jeff or the training staff, can call me whenever they want. I mean, I'm really close with Jeff, really close with our training staff, Erin Penninger. She's awesome. Just priding those relationships and holding those close to my heart is something that I want to be known for after it's all said and done.
That's, I think, a good way to finish this thing. Graham, you guys got huge expectations there at Georgetown, but we can't wait to see what you guys do on the field this spring. We appreciate the time, and good luck. Stay healthy out there.
Yep. Thanks for having me out, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Graham. Hit him straight, all right? And shoot him straight, too.
I know. I got to shoot him straight first.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Graham.
Have a good one. Thank you, guys.
For those watching the show, correction, there is no McDonald's All-American. Everybody should hopefully have understood that I was talking about Under Armour All-Americans when breaking down Northwestern.
Yes, thank you for correcting.
I apologize.
It's okay. No,
anyway,
it's not a big deal.
Let's move on.
They're All-Americans.
They are All-Americans.
Yeah.
In lacrosse, they're Under Armour.
And now we're going to talk about the American Conference.
Oh,
all
good
right.
Transition.
Who you got, Travis?
This one was not a hard one for me. It's Florida, unbeaten in the AAC a year ago. Once again, the team just keeps reloading. They're a top 10 team in the preseason here when you look at them in some of these preseason polls. Two of their first three are against UNC and Maryland this year, which I think is going to be I mean, this team's always battle-tested, but I think is a really unique opportunity. They get one of those two. I think it's North Carolina at home there in Gainesville. That's a big opportunity for them. Sarah Resnick is a preseason All-American back in goal. And they've got the reigning freshman of the year in the AAC and Danielle Pavanelli back. There are some question marks for them, though. They've got a lot of pieces to replace, so I think this is going to be a bit of a transition year. You talk about I feel like there are years when you feel like you got everybody coming back, and years where that class of everybody that had been around for a while leaves. That's this year for Florida. So it'll be interesting to see how they kind of find some of those new pieces, but as you know, the talent's there for Florida. It's just who steps up and fills some of those roles.
Yeah, I mean, you lose Shannon Kavanaugh, who had been a fixture there. Their top three scorers alongside Shannon. She was sort of do it all. So I want you to remember the name Paisley Egan, who was second on the team last year in scoring, second in draw controls, and could be the one that sort of takes that next step and takes that mantle as that next Florida Gators star. And like you said, Resnick, of course, in goal is there, and she's going to be the backstop. Don't forget, they were a team that finished top 5 in scoring and defense last year. year. So dominating the conference through and through. Can't wait to see what they're going to do outside of that this year.
Two more things with this Gators team. One, Reggie Thorpe, the former Syracuse assistant, spent a year with the New York Riptide to help launch the NLL. He is now an assistant coach down there. So that is a plus for this Gators program. And Emma Lopinto, #1 freshman attacker in the country, according to Inside Lacrosse. So they talk about bringing in new talent. She's another person to keep your eye on.
And if you're looking for someone outside of Florida in that conference, don't look too much farther than Vanderbilt. They bring back their top 3 scorers from a year ago. They were kind of sneaky and did some things throughout the season and were competitive in that. They lost to Jacksonville in the NCAA tournament. So they were a tournament team last year.
As was Temple.
As was Temple, and another good team that went into the final and lost to Florida there. So Vanderbilt could be another team that is able to get some things done. They bring back their top scorer. Gabby Fournier is the one to watch there, and their top defender, Melissa Hawkins. So Vanderbilt will be battle-tested, and they maybe will do a little bit more competing at the top here.
Tom, you know what this weekend starts?
What does this weekend start?
College lacrosse. We got college lacrosse this weekend, people.
Mercer Bellarmine.
You watching?
I will put it on. Yes, we will. That is my job, after all.
Who do you like?
Mercer Bellarmine? I'm going to go with Mercer.
Couple of former conference foes.
Yes.
Now in different conferences as the SoCon and the Atlantic Sun have
split. So it'll be interesting to see what those teams look like and how they will sort of dictate things in those conferences moving forward.
Yeah, so you want to kick off your lacrosse. If you're like us up in New England, we're going to be snowed in on Saturday most likely. So put on Mercer and Bellarmine.
Noon.
Not sure where it's streaming, but we will find it.
If not, follow the live stats.
Yeah, exactly.
we've all been there, right?
So
we've all done that.
We've made it, the first unofficial weekend of college lacrosse. Enjoy it. We will see you right back here next week.
See you, everyone.